A linebacker stands alone under the bright stadium lights, helmet low, eyes locked in, breathing slow. He's not smiling. He's not talking. He's waiting. And across the line of scrimmage, every man in a different colored jersey is thinking the same thing. Please, don't let him hit me. Because when James Harrison hit you, you felt it. In your ribs, in your helmet, in your soul. But what made his story different wasn't just how hard he hit. It was how hard the NFL tried to stop him. They fined him. They flagged him. They changed the rules. And still, he refused to back down. He wasn't drafted. He wasn't wanted. He wasn't supposed to last. But somehow, this undrafted kid from Akron, Ohio, became one of the most feared defenders the game had ever seen. A Super Bowl hero, a Defensive Player of the Year, and the symbol of a fight between the old-school brutality of football and the league that wanted to change it. This isn't just the story of a football player. It's the story of a man who turned rejection into rage, and rage into legacy. Welcome to Black and Gold Legacy, where we honor the legends, the warriors, and the stories that define Pittsburgh Steelers history. If you love true football stories that go beyond the field, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. This is The NFL Tried to Stop Him, but couldn't. The James Harrison story. Early life, built different. James Henry Harrison Jr. was born on May 4, 1978, in Akron, Ohio, a city known for its factories, hard work, and grit. The kind of place where you learn toughness early, because nothing comes easy. Harrison was the youngest of 14 children, and life in a house that big meant competition started at home. His mother, Mildred, worked hard to raise her family, and discipline wasn't optional, it was a way of life. From a young age, James showed signs of being different. He wasn't just strong, he was driven. But that drive often came with anger. Coaches in Akron described him as talented but fiery, intense to the point where it sometimes scared other kids. At Coventry High School, Harrison became a two-sport athlete, excelling in both football and track and field. But it was on the football field where he stood out. He played with raw aggression, the kind that couldn't be taught. He wasn't the biggest player on the team, but he was the most explosive. Still, that intensity came at a price. He was suspended multiple times, including once for getting into an on-field altercation. He even had run-ins with the law, including a minor arrest in his teens, the kind of thing that could have derailed his future before it began. But through all of it, Harrison learned something about himself. He didn't quit. He might lose his temper. He might fall. But he always came back harder. That chip on his shoulder wasn't just emotion. It became his identity. After high school, few major colleges wanted him. He wasn't tall enough for linebacker standards. He wasn't polished. Some recruiters even called him too small, too angry, too unpredictable. But one school decided to take a chance, Kent State University. It wasn't Alabama. It wasn't Ohio State. But it was a place where James Harrison could finally prove everyone wrong. College struggles, the misfit linebacker. When James Harrison arrived at Kent State University, he wasn't the kind of recruit that made headlines. He wasn't tall enough, didn't come from a powerhouse high school, and his attitude had already earned him a reputation. But what he lacked in polish, he made up for in something you couldn't measure: pure intensity. At Kent State, Harrison found himself surrounded by players who doubted him, coaches who questioned him, and opponents who underestimated him. But every practice became a personal battle. He didn't play to impress. He played to dominate. Still, his early college career was anything but smooth. His temper and aggressive playing style got him into trouble again. He was suspended multiple times, including for fights during practice. Coaches struggled to control him. Some even thought he'd never last. But slowly, something began to change. Harrison started channeling that rage, focusing it instead of letting it explode. He began to study film, refine his technique, and understand how to use his power strategically. By his junior and senior seasons, he was no longer just the angry kid from Akron. He was the leader of Kent State's defense, recording over 100 tackles and 15 sacks in his final 2 seasons. Still, when the 2002 NFL draft arrived, no team called his name. NFL scouts said he was too short, too old school, and too undisciplined. Some teams even refused to bring him in for workouts because of his attitude record. When the draft ended, Harrison had no team, no contract, and no guarantees. He was undrafted, another name on a long list of players who were supposed to fade away. But for James Harrison, that was all he needed to hear, because every no he ever heard, from high school to college, had only pushed him harder. And this time, he was ready to fight his way into the NFL. The comeback, earning his spot. When the 2002 NFL draft ended, James Harrison's phone never rang. He wasn't drafted. He wasn't signed. He was just another name. A player teams thought was too short, too angry, and too unpredictable. But the Pittsburgh Steelers decided to give him a shot. They saw something, raw power, explosiveness, and a kind of aggression that couldn't be coached. Harrison signed as an undrafted free agent, a long shot to even make the practice squad. From day one, he treated every drill like it was war. He lifted harder, hit faster, and practiced longer than everyone else. But the NFL isn't kind to undrafted rookies, and Harrison learned that fast. He was cut multiple times, bouncing between the Steelers' practice squad and unemployment. He even spent time with the Ravens, but was cut again before ever playing a regular season snap. At one point, he even considered quitting football altogether. For a short time, Harrison went back home to Akron, working small jobs and wondering if his dream was over. He felt the sting of being rejected by the same league he devoted his life to reaching. But giving up was never an option. He returned to training with a vengeance, building strength, improving his technique, and sharpening his discipline. By 2004, injuries in Pittsburgh's defense opened a small window of opportunity. Harrison was re-signed by the Steelers, again as a backup, again with no guarantees. But this time, he came back different. He wasn't just playing angry. He was playing smart. He had learned from veterans like Joey Porter and Jason Gilden, studying how they read plays, how they prepared, how they carried themselves. When his chance came, he took it. In limited snaps, he showed power, speed, and a relentless motor that coaches couldn't ignore. By 2005, he had earned a full roster spot. By 2007, he had become a starter. The same man who'd been cut 4 times now stood as one of the most feared linebackers in Pittsburgh, a defense that didn't hand out respect easily. For James Harrison, every rejection, every doubt, every door that closed had led him here. He had finally earned his place, not through luck or connections, but through sheer will. The rise of a monster, dominance, and fear. By the time James Harrison became a starter, the Pittsburgh Steelers' defense was already strong. But with him on the field, it became something else entirely. Harrison brought back the kind of fear that had defined old-school football. He wasn't just making tackles. He was punishing ball carriers. Every hit felt like a message. Don't come back this way again. In 2007, he finally broke out. That season, Harrison recorded 8.5 sacks, 7 forced fumbles, and led the Steelers in tackles. He was named the team's MVP, the first undrafted player to ever earn that honor in franchise history. But that was just the beginning. The following year, 2008, would change everything. Harrison had one of the greatest defensive seasons in modern NFL history. 16 sacks, 101 tackles, 7 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. He became the anchor of the league's #1 ranked defense and the embodiment of toughness and consistency. He didn't just play defense, he controlled it. Offensive coordinators had to redesign blocking schemes just to deal with him. He was explosive off the line, powerful in his leverage, and relentless in his pursuit. That year, he was named the NFL Defensive Player of the Year, the first undrafted player in Steelers history to ever win the award. In a league filled with first-round stars and million-dollar contracts, James Harrison had clawed his way from the bottom to the very top. Teammates described him as unstoppable, the guy who set the tone in every practice, the man who made even veterans nervous in tackling drills. But Harrison's dominance wasn't just about strength. He was a student of the game. He studied opponents obsessively, memorizing formations and play calls. He didn't just react, he anticipated. He once said, "I don't play angry anymore. I play prepared." By the end of 2008, there was no more doubt. James Harrison wasn't just a great linebacker. He had become the most feared man in football. The controversy, when the NFL fought back. By 2010, James Harrison wasn't just a star. He was the symbol of what made football violent, physical, and thrilling. But to the NFL, he had also become the face of something they wanted to change. The league had begun a public push for player safety, responding to growing concerns about concussions and head injuries. The goal was clear: reduce dangerous hits and modernize the game. And almost overnight, Harrison became the player caught in the middle of that shift. In October 2010, during a game against the Cleveland Browns, Harrison delivered two crushing, but clean, hits on Josh Cribbs and Mohamed Massaquoi. Both players suffered concussions, and the NFL reacted immediately. Within 24 hours, the league announced a new policy. Any dangerous or flagrant hits, especially those involving the helmet, would result in fines or suspensions. And their first target was James Harrison. The NFL fined him $75,000, one of the largest fines in league history, for an on-field play at that time. Harrison was furious. He insisted the hits were clean, textbook tackles that had been part of football for decades. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," he told reporters. "But if I can't hit the way I was taught, I don't know how to play this game anymore." Over the next 2 seasons, Harrison became the most fined player in the NFL, losing over $150,000 in total for hits the league deemed illegal. Each time, he adjusted his form, tried to follow the new guidelines, and still got flagged. Fans began to notice a pattern. It wasn't just about safety anymore. It started to feel personal. Harrison openly criticized Commissioner Roger Goodell, calling him biased and inconsistent. In one interview, he said what many players were thinking: they're trying to turn football into flag football. To some, Harrison was a villain, too violent for the modern game. To others, he was a hero, the last true defender of the old-school Steelers mentality. Tough, fearless, and unapologetic. The NFL could fine him, suspend him, and rewrite the rulebook around him. But they still couldn't stop him. Even after the controversy, Harrison continued to dominate, still producing sacks, still setting the tone for Pittsburgh's defense. He became a living contradiction, the player the NFL wanted to change, but couldn't replace. And in 2009's Super Bowl 43, James Harrison would give the world a reminder of exactly why they couldn't ignore him, no matter how hard they tried. Redemption and the iconic play. The controversy, the fines, the criticism. None of it mattered anymore when Super Bowl 43 kicked off on February 1st, 2009, in Tampa, Florida. The Pittsburgh Steelers were facing the Arizona Cardinals, led by veteran quarterback Kurt Warner, in a clash that would test every ounce of their defense. For James Harrison, this was more than just another game. It was the stage where he could finally prove, to the league, to the critics, to himself, that no rule change, no fine, and no commissioner could define him. With just seconds left in the first half, Arizona had the ball on the Steelers' goal line, threatening to take the lead before halftime. Defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau called a play designed to pressure Warner into a quick throw. Harrison lined up on the edge, ready to blitz. But what happened next became one of the most legendary moments in Super Bowl history. As Warner dropped back, Harrison didn't rush. Instead, he read the play, saw the quarterback's eyes lock on receiver Antoine Bolden, and dropped back into coverage. In one split-second move, he stepped in front of the pass, intercepted it, and started running. Not 10 yards, not 20. He ran 100 yards, dodging blockers, absorbing hits, and refusing to go down. Time expired as he crossed the goal line and collapsed in the end zone. A moment of pure exhaustion and glory. It was the longest play in Super Bowl history. A defensive touchdown that completely changed the game, and in many ways, James Harrison's entire legacy. The Steelers went on to win 27-23, securing their 6th Lombardi trophy. And even though Santonio Holmes caught the game-winning touchdown later, the moment everyone remembered was Harrison's run, the unstoppable willpower of a man the league had tried to silence. That play symbolized everything about him: discipline, instinct, power, and heart. It wasn't just about scoring points. It was about proving something bigger. No matter how many times they fined him, flagged him, or doubted him, James Harrison couldn't be stopped. Legacy, the man they couldn't control. By the time James Harrison's career began to wind down, one thing was clear. He had left a mark on the game that would never fade. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to last. And yet, he became the living definition of what it means to fight for everything. In a league built around draft status and expectations, Harrison was the exception, an undrafted player who became the face of the most feared defense in football. His story became proof that you didn't need pedigree or privilege, just relentless work, belief, and a refusal to quit. Harrison's workout routines became legendary. Teammates would describe him lifting weights at 5 a.m., running uphill with resistance bands, or doing push-ups with 300 pounds on his back. Even late in his career, he was often in better shape than players 10 years younger. That discipline didn't just make him stronger, it kept him relevant. When the Steelers released him in 2013, he signed briefly with the Cincinnati Bengals and still performed at a high level. In 2014, Pittsburgh brought him back, and at nearly 36 years old, he continued to dominate snaps like a player in his prime. Harrison wasn't the type to chase attention. He didn't care about endorsements or headlines. He only cared about respect and earning it the hard way. His toughness wasn't fake, and neither was his loyalty. He embodied everything the city of Pittsburgh stands for: grit, hard work, and an unbreakable will. When he finally retired in 2018, Harrison left behind a resume few could match. 2 times Super Bowl champion, 5 times Pro Bowler, 2008 Defensive Player of the Year, the longest play in Super Bowl history. But beyond the numbers, his real legacy was attitude. The message that no matter how many times life cuts you, you can always fight your way back. The NFL tried to fine him. They tried to flag him. They even tried to change the rules because of him. But through it all, James Harrison stayed James Harrison. In the story of football's toughest men, there are players who hit hard, and then there's James Harrison, the man who changed what toughness really meant. He wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a media favorite. He didn't have an easy path. But when the whistle blew, and the game was on the line, there was no one more feared, more respected, or more determined. The NFL fined him. Critics doubted him. Even time tried to slow him down. But none of it worked. Because James Harrison wasn't built to stop. He was built to endure. From going undrafted, to being cut 4 times, to delivering the greatest defensive play in Super Bowl history. His career wasn't luck. It was persistence, power, and preparation. He played the game the only way he knew how, his way. And in doing so, he became more than a linebacker. He became a symbol of grit, defiance, and an unbreakable will. Today, when people look back at the Steelers' greatest defenders, names like Lambert, Green, Blunt, and Ham, one thing is certain: James Harrison belongs right there with them. Because they tried to fine him. They tried to flag him. They tried to stop him. But they couldn't. This was the NFL tried to stop him, but couldn't. The James Harrison story. If you love stories of Steelers legends, forgotten warriors, and football history that still gives you chills, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Black and Gold Legacy, where the greatest stories of Pittsburgh's past are never forgotten.